Do you speak Spanish, mate, or
Un
no?
poco, very little.
Yeah, yeah. I can barely order a burrito. Like, it's not going to
Uh,
happen. Like, my wife grew up. She's got plenty of time in Puerto Rico. We'll go over there. I'm literally using Google Translate for everything. And she's like, well, we'll give ourselves an hour. We'll be fine. I'm like, no, we need 2 hours because I'm gonna have to stop. It's chaos. Don't travel with me. I'm a liability. All right, welcome to Local Energy 44. My name is Peter Brecht. I'm here with Wade Spear, and our guest today is Krystina Amos. And we're here to talk about well control today. So, Krystina, thanks for jumping on.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
I've been looking forward to this call for quite a while now. So you and I were introduced about 2 years ago through a mutual friend, Derek Huddleston, who's an offshore engineer. And Wade now kind of helps us with our onshore stuff too. But you're in the well control space. And I've been on your newsletter now for, I think, 2 years.
Yep.
I got added to that quite early. So I've had a little bit of understanding with well control from the insurance side. Like, I know the carriers, look at it for as a higher risk and all these other things. They want to see different safety things in place. But so anyways, kind of getting into a 101 concept, like what is well control, and kind of, walk us through some of the basics.
Right. Well, in case any of your listeners are new to well control, the first question that I like to ask people who ask me what well control is, which of course happens
Mhm.
all the time when they ask me what I do and I say I'm a well control instructor, the next question is always, what is that? So my question to them is, well, have you seen the movie Deepwater Horizon? And here's the flow
Yes.
chart.
Right.
Here's the flow chart. Have you seen Deepwater Horizon? If yes, then I respond to them, well, these classes are to teach how to not let that events like that happen. So how
Gotcha.
to not let wells blow out. And then, of course, going back to the flow chart, if they say no, they haven't seen the movie, okay, that requires more explanation. But
Hmm.
that's pretty much how I describe it. Just
Yeah.
managing pressures in the well to prevent wells from blowing out. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are not familiar with our industry think that, they'll ask me, well, why would you do that? I thought you all wanted the wells to blow out. Like, I thought you're supposed to drill into the rock and strike oil. And if the well blows out, then it's good. And you guys get all excited and happy. Like, no, no.
Is there a difference between well control for offshore versus onshore? Or there's got to be, right?
Yeah, there is. Oh, there's tons of overlap because physics is physics, right? Pressures are pressures. A well is a well. However, with subsea well control, there are a lot more things that we have to think about because the the surface of the well is actually the mud liner, the seafloor. So above that, you can have up to, I mean, in some cases, up to 10,000 feet of water. So there are other elements that we have to think about. For example, if there is an event and a kick is taken and they need to circulate the influx out of the well, then they're going to
Right.
have to close the BOP that's on the seafloor and then circulate down the drill string, up the annulus of the well, and then through a super long choke line. So
Hmm.
that circulating through the choke line creates friction, a lot of friction. And if we don't know how to manage that, then we're going to risk blowing the bottom out.
Okay. And how common are these events, right? I mean, I can't imagine it happens on every well, right? And because we don't want it to happen.
Not too often, it's especially uncommon offshore. They're pretty good about safety, especially compared to certain land operations. There are certain companies that work on land where they do things that we would never have done offshore.
One question I have is, in terms of like, I'd say land versus offshore, what do you feel like geologically speaking? I mean, is it a lot more consistent? I mean, do you think that there's a lot more, well, whenever I think of offshore, I think of a lot of money. Like I think of extreme planning beforehand, right? Because your
Mhm.
rigs are running $250,000 a day, or even a lot of times
More,
more than that.
over a million a day. Yeah.
Right. And so there's a lot of planning and there's also a lot of money that's spent pre-well in terms of like understanding the subsurface and all of that. Whereas on land, the economics of it just don't, what I'd say support a lot of that. You can't go out and get 3D seismic on every location. And so does some of that play into account, do you think, as well? Because I mean, in some of the zones that we drill on land, like I would say the Morrow is one of those. It's a channel sand, and it's present in some places and not present in others. And you drill into it, you don't have a blowout, but you're 2 pounds under balance, and you kind of take a kick while you're drilling through it.
Hmm.
on offshore projects, I mean, is that something that is common, or, that you would have that kind of uncertainty, or is the planning and stuff enough to where it's kind of eliminates most of that?
That's a great question. The answer is yes, it is pretty common. They can drill into overpressured formations
Right.
where the pore pressure is higher than expected. There's really no way to eliminate the risk. So actually, when I first joined the industry, my first job was being a geophysicist. I can't talk.
Okay. Yeah.
Geophysicist intern.
Yeah, yeah.
A little tongue twister. So I was a geophysicist intern for
Right.
a marine survey company, and that was what we did. We shot shallow hazard surveys.
Right.
And of course, we were looking at the geological structures, but also
Right.
looking for other structures. For example, after hurricanes, sometimes pipelines get shifted. Even without hurricanes,
Wow.
they can get shifted and moved over time. Yeah, we do pipeline inspections, and sometimes we'd find shipwrecks, we'd find old rigs, we'd find all kinds of things. One of the main risks that we were looking for was the risk of shallow
Right.
flow, whether it be shallow pockets of gas, water, whatever the formation fluid might be. That was a big thing we had to enter into the geohazard report. When I was first learning, I'll just focus on shallow gas pockets.
Right.
When I was first learning how to interpret the seismic, sometimes I would find what we call fuzzy spots. And yes, that is what the geophysicists call it. You'd see these fuzzy, yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen seismic. It's a bunch of black,
Yeah.
when you first get it, it's black and white
Yep.
squiggly lines.
Yep.
And sometimes there would be these like halos that were pretty light, almost white in color. And, I was asking my mentors what that was. And they said, well, because seismic is measuring changes in density, anytime you see something that faint, then it's showing something is way less dense than everything around it. And it usually indicates gas, because gas has the least density of all the fluids, and especially lighter than rocks. So
Right.
the point is that over time, I was gaining more and more confidence with interpreting seismic, and
Right.
then they started giving me more responsibilities. Then they started allowing me to get the geohazard report started and write it myself, and then they would check my work. And so I'll never forget the first time they gave me this task, when I got to the section of the geohazard report where it asked what the risk level was of shallow gas flow.
Mm-hmm.
I put no risk. And so I got in big trouble for that. Of course, this hadn't gone out to anybody, but I
Right.
got chastised by my boss, by the senior geophysicist. And
Right.
he's like, Krystina, you can't ever, ever put no risk. He said, we can say low, low to medium risk, low risk, medium risk, high risk. We can never write no risk, because we do not know everything. So for example, let's say the day that they shot the survey, what if, even if it were true, if we could say with 100% certainty that there was no gas in that spot the day they shot the survey, well, how long after they shoot the survey are they going to drill the well? It could be 6 months later, it could be a year later, who knows, depending on different factors. So he's like, even if there were no gas present that day, how do you know that gas hadn't seeped up after that? What if there was an earthquake between the time we took the survey and the time they're going to drill it? And if there's an earthquake, that would create a fault, and then gas could migrate up from the lower zone into the upper zone. Like, you can never say there's no risk. We don't know everything. We said, always remember, all the seismic are showing us, like, it's not a photograph of what's going on subsurface. All it is just showing us the time it takes for sound to travel from point A to point B back to point A.
Right.
All it is showing us is just travel time of sound. All it shows us is changes in density. Everything we're doing is purely interpretation, and we certainly don't know everything. Even if we could be certain, things might have changed. And besides that, based on the way the surveys are shot, they're shot in a grid, and it's not like every single nanometer of the area is going to be included. So there are definitely going to be blind spots.
Gotcha. So, like, kind of going back to my very basic understanding of well control, right? So what exactly is causing these kicks, and like, as you're drilling, how would you anticipate or maybe see that starting to happen?
Hey, let me clarify the question. Are you asking how kicks happen, or how we can recognize that there's a kick in the well?
I think both, right? So the first part would be like why is it occurring in the first place? And then the second part would be how would you recognize the occurrence in order to start avoiding a negative outcome?
Okay, so there are different causes for kicks, but the main cause is just somehow the bottom hole pressure in the well becomes less than the pore pressure of the formation. So that's
Okay.
it. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
What is so to if in case people aren't familiar with what bottom hole pressure is, that's the
Mhm.
sum of all the pressures that we're applying to the well. For example, during drilling, conventional drilling, we're going to make sure that the well is always full of drilling mud, which exerts hydrostatic pressure. And then, of course, if we start, as long as we're circulating the well, once we kick the pumps on, we're also having ECD. So there's going to be annular friction just from circulating the fluid up the annulus of the well. So then our bottom hole pressure would be the hydrostatic of the mud plus your annular pressure loss. And then if we're circulating through a choke, for example, like MPD, we're circulating through a choke, we're also going to be adding some surface back pressure. So all of those pressures together would equal the bottom hole pressure. As long as we're exerting enough bottom hole pressure to overcome formation pressure, a kick is not going to enter the well. It's simple physics, high pressure always wins. So
Okay.
how the kicks how can we lose bottom hole pressure? Could be the reason you talked about before. We drill into a formation and the pressure was just higher than what we expected it to be. Another and one of the more common causes of kicks is actually what we call swabbing. So let's say we're going to trip out of hole. We're going to pull the drill string out of the well. Then we're not going to be circulating. So conventional drilling, we're depending on the hydrostatic pressure of our mud to keep the well balanced. So the pressure of the mud would need to be at least equal to formation pressure, ideally a little bit more. And if we pull the string too fast, then we can suck up a little bit of the mud off the bottom, and it could temporarily reduce bottom hole pressure just enough that it could even just be a few seconds. But in those few seconds, bottom hole pressure is less than formation pressure.
Okay.
It's been proven that it's been determined that most kicks are due to trips.
I
Okay.
want to say I saw something one time that was like 85 or 90% of all well control events occur during a trip.
I've heard 75 to 80%, but yeah, it's always on the higher
It's a high
side.
percentage.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's usually it's a high percentage. And not only for drilling operations, that applies for work, during workovers too.
Okay. Wait, how would this, because we talked about underbalanced drilling. I don't know if you remember
Hmm.
that a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago. I mean, this sounds like an underbalanced drilling nightmare. Or am I conflating the two topics?
I mean, they're a little bit related. I mean, when you talk about pressure, like Krystina said, the physics of it is that, pressure flows from high to low areas to try and equalize all the time. And so that's whenever you get that kick. When you're drilling underbalanced, you're trying to, you're using a mud weight and everything that's lower than what your formation pressure is. But you've got to have, like Krystina mentioned, like an MPD system. I mean, you've got to have something in there that keeps it close to balance. And the thing about those MPD systems is you can adjust the amount of back pressure that you're holding. You can essentially create, well, I don't know if I'd call it false mud weight, but I mean, you can create additional pressure, bottom hole pressure, by kind of closing in your choke and choking back your flow a little bit. And so, I don't know if you might be conflating them a little bit
Yeah.
in that sense, but yeah, if you're drilling underbalanced, you're much more likely to take a kick whenever you hit a permeable or
Well,
a porous zone.
the thing is, it's also important not to confuse managed pressure drilling with underbalanced drilling. Because if you're talking about true underbalanced drilling, they really are taking a kick the entire time they're drilling. They're drilling with a fluid weight that is not the bottom hole pressure is not enough to prevent a kick, but they have to have the right equipment to be able to do that. It's basically have to divert the kick while they're drilling, diverting and flaring the whole time. But that's not
Hmm.
the same as managed pressure drilling. Managed pressure drilling is not underbalanced drilling. They typically use a mud weight that is hydrostatically underbalanced, but they're not allowing the well. The goal is to prevent the well from becoming underbalanced. So let's not confuse those two.
Hmm.
So I got a quick
Interesting.
question for you. If you're drilling, so like on land, we drill a lot of the times in like a shale, right? And so in those shales, there's just zero perm. I mean, it's just really low
Right.
permeability.
Almost
And
zero.
so even though the formation is at a much higher pressure, right? None of the gas can actually flow to you. So would you consider that underbalanced drilling, or like by the definition you're giving, would you consider that underbalanced drilling or not? Like, when you're going in frac it, your frac gradient's pretty high, but you're just not ever seeing any, you're never seeing any flow because there's no perm. So how would you define that? I guess I'm asking, so if you're drilling in a shale formation that
Mhm.
doesn't have any permeability,
Mhm.
but like your frac gradient and everything else is much higher than what your actual mud weight is,
Mhm.
right? So reservoir pressure is a lot higher than what your actual bottom hole pressure is, right? Because but because there's no perm, the gas can't flow to you while you're drilling. Like, would you say that's underbalanced drilling, or would you just like, is it based on what formation versus bottom hole, or is it just, kind of like, are you seeing gas or not as you're drilling out? I'm just wondering about the like
Hmm.
specific definition there, because it's interesting because we drill, like, you take the Woodford Shale for example here in Oklahoma. Like when we drill it, like 16,000 TBD. I mean, you can drill it with a 13 or a 13 and a half mud weight, but like the actual formation
Hmm.
pressure is so much higher than what we're
Oh, that's
actually doing. And
interesting.
so, right. And so I've always wondered, like, how would you define that? Would you define that as underbalanced drilling, or would it be a different definition? I don't know. I mean, that's something I might have to look up because we've
Yeah.
always done that. We don't have to go all the way up to the formation pressure because there's no perm, and so it's an interesting kind of maybe it's a
Well,
corner case. I don't know, but
that's
something to think about. I'm gonna look
interesting.
at that up. Yeah,
That's interesting. However, just as a geologist, be careful with
right.
that because that's a risk you're taking. When I was taking my petroleum engineering classes, they gave us an assignment that it really was eye-opening for me. The professor gave us this assignment, and I studied through University of Aberdeen, so everything
Mhm.
is based on North Sea, UK. And the title of the assignment was 40 years in the 40s field. So how the assignment started is they gave us the information about the first well they ever drilled, their Wildcat well, and we had to calculate how much after drilling their first well, how much known data did we have about the entire 40s? So of course it was a
Right.
minuscule percentage.
One
That was
data point.
way, way, way less than 1%. And then, and then they gave us a data set that, so many, maybe 5 years later, now they had drilled this many wells and so on and so forth. There were different phases. Every single time, I could never even get 1%. Okay, I'll fast forward to the end of the project. So the very end, now it was 40 years of working in the 40s field. Now they had so many wells that had been drilled, so many had been produced, and now they were even in the secondary recovery phase. They had injection wells. And I thought, now I'm going to get some kind of significant percentage because now by this time, there were over 200 wells. So I calculated it and I thought I was messing up because no matter what I did, I could never even get 1%. It was always still 0.000%. So I thought that I made a mistake and I was messing up, but then I ran out of time. So I had to just submit the assignment. Well, I ended up getting an A on it. My calculations were not wrong. So the professor gave that assignment, and the moral of the story was never think that you know everything about the field. It doesn't matter how many hundreds of
Right.
wells you have, even though people say, oh, everything's just cookie cutter because now we know everything about these formations in the field. Like we don't even know. In this case, they didn't even know 1%. And you have to think about it. And like later on, I was taking the reservoir simulation course and plugging all these data into the software. We were using Petrel. So plugging everything in and doing these simulations. And you have to realize that it doesn't matter. You could be using the best reservoir software in the world. But all these data points we're putting in, if it's not even 1% of the entire field, all the simulators are doing is just crunching numbers and interpolating what we know. It doesn't matter how many
Hmm.
offset wells you have, the data and projections and models that we're given, they're just based on interpolation. So just be careful with it. We really don't know everything. And even though shale
Yeah.
doesn't have good primary permeability, it can have secondary permeability. For example,
Faulting
if
and
there
right.
is a fault, if there is any tectonic plate movement and there's a fault, then a lot of those pores are going to get connected and there is the possibility for flow. Kicks certainly
Mhm.
have been taken from shale formations. It does
Right.
happen. So just be
No,
careful about
Yeah.
we've definitely hit a
Huh.
couple of, like you said, secondary permeability streaks in there before.
Yeah.
Like you said, though, not common, but
Yeah,
definitely dealt
from
with it.
a well-controlled perspective, it's not a good idea to purposefully drill under balance because you never know.
Yeah.
This is
It's
Romeo, by the way.
there you go. I was gonna ask what's the cat's name?
I didn't know he was in here, but I
Yeah,
guess
special guest. It's all right.
he wanted to make an appearance.
It's
Yeah.
all right. That's a heck of an assignment for just coming away with the idea that we don't really know a lot, right? I mean, that's a lot of work for that final outcome. But I guess that's probably a good thing to know.
Yeah, one of my professors at Aberdeen said all models are wrong, some are useful. They
Yes,
really
I've heard that.
Heard that.
they really drove that into our heads.
Absolutely. We've got the IADC and we have IWCF.
Mhm.
We look at the drilling contracts from IADC all the time, as part of my job. But what's the difference between these two entities? I mean, I know they're both important, but do they
Mhm.
play a different role, or are they pretty much the same?
When it comes to well control training, they're quite similar. IEDC is based in Houston, Texas, and IWCF is based in the UK. But both of them are accrediting bodies. So to get a valid well control certificate, the companies are usually going to require that you either get IWCF or IEDC accredited
Okay,
training.
so it'll be one or the other. You don't need both necessarily. It just depends on where you're going.
No, pardon the pun, that would be overkill, but
Yeah.
But it really depends what company you work for and also which region you work for.
Okay.
There's some companies that don't care either way as long as you get, like, let's say you need supervisor level. Some companies don't necessarily care if you get IEDC supervisor level, or the equivalent of that would be IWCF level 4. Some companies don't care, but then some of them only want IEDC. Some of them will only accept IWCF. So it's based on company policy.
Gotcha. Good to know. All right. So this is something that you and I had before recording had talked about, and I didn't want to ask too much about it just because I wanted to kind of learn while we're talking here. But what defines a well out of control?
What comes to my mind is the blowout. So let's make a distinction between a well blowing out and a well that is kicking. So let's say we are going to trip the drill string out of the hole, or work string if you're in workover. Let's say we're going to do a trip, we're going to pull out of hole, and maybe maybe there's a lot of annular restriction, not too much space between the hole wall and the BHA. And let's say we were pulling fast, we were in a hurry, pulling fast, and we swabbed in a kick. Well, that's not the end of the world. Kicks happen. A lot of times they are preventable, but not 100% of the time. So sometimes they will happen. It could also happen, especially if we're drilling into a higher pressured formation. We had no way of knowing that, a kick is going to enter the well. So kicks can happen. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to lose control of the well. As long as we shut the well in and secure the well and circulate the kick out, then we're still in control of the well as long as we're maintaining our bottom hole pressure over formation pressure. Now, when would we say that a well is actually blowing out? That would be when you start to see formation fluid at surface. And this is really the image that comes to most people's minds when they think about well control. And it's kind of funny when we talk about well control, the first image that comes to mind is a well blowing out, which is actually a well out of control. If you have oil and gas coming at surface and the rig's catching fire, the well is not under control. So true well control. Like if a rig is really in control of the well, it's going to be a boring day. When it comes to well control, no news is good news. You don't want things like that to be happening. And even if a small kick does enter the well, in most cases, as long as they recognize it in time and shut the well in and control it, in most cases, they'll be able to get the kick out and bring the well back under control. But if they don't do anything and don't even try to kill the well, then eventually that kick is going to get to surface and it's going to blow out.
Okay. And why is there, you and I had talked, and there's disagreement around like some of these definitions, and even with, in well control training, like what do you think that comes from?
I want to say it comes from movies like There Will Be Blood.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
I haven't seen that.
Well,
but Wade knows I haven't seen most movies that he sent to me. So
Yeah,
you
both
should.
of them.
You should. It takes place in California.
all right. Yeah, I probably should watch that one next.
It's
I'll add it to my list. Wade.
Yeah. You
All
should.
right.
It takes place in the, the early age of drilling when they were drilling out in California. So anyway, but if you watch movies like that and you don't know anything else, that's when you see,
Yeah.
they were just
Okay.
letting wells blow out and everybody was laughing and dancing around with buckets to catch the oil.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
where it comes from. I want to say movies.
Well, we'll kind of pivot over into, why you started your training company. And so how long have you been with Infinite Energy? Like when did you found that and what was kind of the impetus behind it?
I started Infinite Energy Solutions in June 2021. I used to work as a full-time well control instructor for various companies, but then I decided in early 2021 I decided to go back offshore. So I went back offshore for a couple of years, and when I updated my LinkedIn profile, well control schools started DMing me and asking me, "Oh, now that you're not working for anyone specifically, would you be willing to come teach classes for us as a contractor on your weeks off when you're not offshore?"
Hmm.
So I'll admit, at the beginning, I was not keen on it. Like, the whole point of me going back offshore is to have weeks off. Like, that was the
Right.
whole point. The only time I
Yeah.
ever felt I had the true work-life balance is when I was working offshore. It's like, when I'm
Hmm.
off, I'm off, and I get weeks off at a time.
Right.
But I didn't want to burn any bridges, so I was polite and I thought about it. I took a break from well control from teaching for several months. And then I decided, why not? I can always do it. And if I ever do start to feel burned out, I could always just say no, right?
Right.
So that's
Yep.
actually how my company happened. I wouldn't say I truly intended it for it to happen. Everything just happened. So I just registered it
Yeah.
for the LLC. That way I could work as a contractor. So that's how it
Yeah.
started. I juggled both for a couple of years, but I've been fully self-employed since I want to say March 2023. So it's been a
Okay.
little over 2 years. And the
Awesome.
the freedom that comes with that is that when I'm not teaching, then I can do other things too.
Yeah, it's a bit different than being offshore for sure. And the way that you design your courses are like you're trying to give the student, right, things that they can put into action immediately. You actually custom design these courses, right?
Well, I have worked in curriculum development, especially when I worked for schools as a full-time
Hmm.
employee. So, yeah, I've
Okay.
actually worked a lot in curriculum development. But yes, that's always the intention. But the thing is we have to have several goals. And I know they say that you can't have more than one priority. By definition, priority is can only be one thing. However, when it comes to well control training, there are several priorities. For example, if the school wants to be accredited to teach both IADC and IWCF well control courses, when we're designing the curriculum, we have to make sure that we follow IADC guidelines, that we follow IWCF guidelines. They both have handbooks. They have all the topics that we need to cover and to what depth. So we do have to make sure we cover everything they want. And as far as making it relevant, easily apply to the field, I think the best way to do that is really, really what happens in the classroom when it comes to facilitating the training. And that's something I really try to do. I never, in my classes at least, I never want this to be all about, okay, we're going to look at these slides and you're going to take a test and that'll be it. Like, no, I always try to keep it relevant and I ask a lot of open ended questions and I ask them, well, what have you seen in your experience?
Hmm.
Let's, get away from the slides. What have you seen? Have you done anything like this? When this happened, how did you guys handle it? And how can you do, I just want to make sure everybody knows that they play a part in well control. So it's this balance that we have to hit of covering what these accreditation bodies want us to cover, but making sure that we don't act like, we're universities in a classroom, because this
Hmm.
is not just about passing the test. The reality is, yes, at the end of the class, there is going to be a standardized exam, but we have to remember the real reason why we're in these trainings, and it's to
Right.
prevent blowouts. And you can have the best training in the world. Training and well control certificates don't prevent blowouts. Only people can do that.
And have you ever had to take well control or anything like that? I
Oh
just
yeah.
don't know like who takes this. Okay. All
Yeah, you
right.
get
Okay.
certified
Plenty of it, I'm
every
sure.
2 years. Yep.
Okay.
Most it's
So,
required for all the guys on the rig, but most of the engineers are
okay.
taking it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
engineers all the time. Yeah, it's field
Okay.
people, engineers, sometimes
Everybody.
geologists.
Okay. All right. Good to know. So you've got this going on. You're also doing translation. We talked about this, there's such a cross section of cultures and people in the oil and gas industry, right? You have such a skill set in translation. Like, talk about what you do there a little bit.
So moving on to my other passion, languages and cultures.
Yeah.
I love it. So I started that. I got into that by accident too. So I did a high school exchange program in Argentina back in 2002 and 2003. I lived with a local family in Mendoza where they make the best Malbec wine. And
Okay.
so I spent a year there, and I started teaching for two of the language schools. I wasn't seeking it out, but word got around that there was, somebody from the US there. So schools were reaching out to me, and I was so young. I didn't want to do it. I was 16 at first. So I was really nervous too. I mean, public speaking was my worst fear.
Mhm.
But when I was 17, somehow I got the confidence, like, okay. And plus I was starting to run out of money. So I needed
So a good
to.
motivator.
Yeah, I was starting to run out of money, and they're like, "Well, it's not a lot. It's 5 pesos an hour, but it'll be something." So I started teaching I think I was teaching for one school for a couple hours Tuesday evenings, and the other one Thursday evenings for a couple hours. So I was doing both. So yeah, started out being an English teacher. I didn't know how to do it. And they're like, "Oh, it's easy. Like, you're a native speaker. All you have to do is answer their questions." Okay. So I started that. And then when I came back to the US, then people would ask me if I would help them, like, do tutoring, like if they were taking a high school or college Spanish class. And then I was working for a company where I was administrative assistant, but they asked me if I could create a language training program from them, because they actually created the position for me because I was bilingual and they needed a bilingual person. They use a lot of temp workers from Mexico. So their visa is, I forgot the name of the visa, but they would just come for like 3 to 6 months. Then they'd go back home and then maybe come back the next year during the busy season. So that what they wanted me to do, they asked me to create like a vocational language training course, but they wanted me to make two. One to teach Spanish to the people in the office, and then another one to teach English to the people who worked in the field, to the people who worked on the rigs and the pipe fitters,
Okay.
the welders.
Yeah.
They're mostly welders and pipe fitters. So it's like
Yeah.
a well-controlled construction and reparation, like after storms. So I started doing that. It was that's when I started my language business.
Okay.
Yeah, I just start businesses because people ask me to do things. So then yeah.
Yeah.
But
No,
anyway, I did that.
Do you speak Spanish? Do you speak Spanish, Wade, or
un
no?
poco, very little.
Yeah, yeah. I can barely order a burrito. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, my wife grew up. She's got plenty of time in Puerto Rico. We'll go over there. I'm literally using Google Translate for everything. And she's like, well, we'll give ourselves an hour. We'll be fine. I'm like, no, we need 2 hours because I'm gonna have to stop. It's chaos. Don't travel with me. I'm a liability. I know that for a fact. Anyways, sorry to cut you off there, Krystina. I just had to ask your new website. So I'm actually looking at it right now, and we'll have a link in the show notes for it too. But you have a study guide just for well control on there, and shared it with us. So I'll direct everyone to go there if you're interested in learning something. I think it's like $9, but if you put local energy in, you can download it for free and check it out there. So, but yeah, where else can people find you and connect with you? Where's the best place to go?
Well, the best place to go would be my website. There's a little chat message. They can send me messages, and I try to respond within 24 hours. And if they don't want to go to my website, then they can find me on LinkedIn.
Well, hey guys, thanks for joining us, and look up Krystina, connect with her on LinkedIn, check out her website. Wade, I'll see you next week, and everyone have a great weekend. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Thanks.